Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. Today's video is the fourth in a series that I am doing on the changing culture of leadership. And in particular, I want to talk about how we measure reality. I know that sounds like a very abstract thing. And being that this is also Christmas Day, I'd like to add that dimension into the discussion of what I want to a distinction that I'd like to make about reality. I've spent the better part of this year, excuse me, studying time and reality, and in so doing, I have both found my own mind of on those two topics of time and reality enriched and confirmed and developed. And I've also found that many of the things which we take for granted or that we take as the way we should look at things like time and reality as inadequate for actually describing what we experience. Let me put this in the context of my faith as a Christian, which and part of that faith led me into the Presbyterian ministry over 50 years ago. I grew up in a home where we attended church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school, went to youth group. I did all the traditional things that came with growing up in a Southern Presbyterian home. My great grandfather had been a Presbyterian minister. My grandfather and my father and so many of my family had been members of Presbyterian churches and had served in leadership roles in the Presbyterian church. So the ethos of Christianity was something that I grew up with. And I didn't think twice about it. I just assumed that, well, I didn't even assume, I just never gave it a second thought as to whether it was true or real or anything like that. Until one night on a youth retreat, my last year in high school, I was 17 years old, and one of my friends sitting in a circle became very honest about his life and very vulnerable to us, his friends. And the thought crossed my mind was that, oh, well, if he's this honest, there must be a God. And before that moment in time, I'd never asked that question because the question had never been presented to me. Because in a certain sense, in many cases, traditional Christian religion is a set of beliefs that have as much to do with the institution of the church and the social life of the church and the belief structure of the church. And it's not unlike the structure of a business or a corporation. There's a set of beliefs and there's a social life that ask people to conform to it, and whoever's the CEO is sort of the pastor of the company, and the board is sort of the board of the board of a church, or they're the board of the. And there's a lot of similarity between how traditional churches function and companies function. And it's one of the reasons why I knew I could step into the role of a consultant, organizational consultant, when I was in my early 40s, because all my experience with churches and with other organizations, community organizations, and with schools, there was a great similarity between all of that. But when I had that experience of kind of an awakening, many people that have been on this podcast before have talked about how important their awakening was to see something. They gained a level of consciousness that they did not have. And I'm one of those. I came to a level of consciousness that I did not have. And what it did was it gave me a reference point for looking at everything that I was doing. So I went through college and I was involved with various campus organizations. And then I spent 2 years doing high school ministry, and then I went off to seminary, and then I became a minister. And in all those situations, I was asking questions, asking questions about, well, is this accurate, or is this real, or is this the truth? Is this really what this is all about? And I was not asking these questions from a position of doubt. I was asking these questions, not unlike scientists ask of the natural world, is, well, what is it that I'm seeing here? How do I understand this? How do I put all these fragments of information together so that I have some kind of coherent understanding of what's going on? I needed a coherent understanding of God alive in the world and where I fit into that picture. And I would say that the way I just framed that is exactly what I was thinking. Because what I recognized after that moment when I was 17 of awareness, of raised consciousness that God is present, was, well, what is the consequence of God's presence? And what I discovered is that only can be known through the practice of faith, of the acts of faith. And in many churches, and this has been true for 2,000 years, belief is a set of principles that you follow. And I mean, in many respects, the world that I I grew up in theologically, in seminary and after, saw religion as something which had an evidentiary certainty to it. And the further I got into studying that, I questioned whether they were overstating what they were seeing. And what I realized was they were mimicking the scientific world in trying to say, here are these truths that are evidentiary, and they were evidence of what is actually true. And they were thinking of themselves in competition with other rational people to say Christianity is a rational choice for people who want to believe in God. I'm not sure that that's the way it works. I'm not sure that we gain any real depth of change or growth simply by finding the evidentiary truth of something. Because I'm not sure that there's any truth that is capable of being proven by its evidence that we have. I think there's always gaps, there's always questions. And the fact that there is a question means that the way we approach, whether it's science or whether we approach the way we do our business, or whether we do this as we approach what we would call faith, whatever you believe in as some kind of spiritual reality, whatever you are placing your faith in is not ever going to have sufficient evidence to justify it unless you decide that that's what you want to say. Because in a very real sense, we are the measures of everything, and therefore we're always in trouble because we can never know everything that we're missing. We can never know everything we don't know. And so we're always working off of incomplete knowledge and over certainty about what we do know. And this is why I believe the Christian faith or the Christian church is really not about what is evidentially true, but it's rather more about what is sufficient enough for me to trust that it will have the desired consequence that I want. And so I'm making a distinction between evidential reality and consequential reality. And what I mean by that is that we can do, I mean, if you're a scientist, you can go to the laboratory, you can sit at your notepad, and you can work out your your questions and you can work out your theorems and you can do your scientific work um, in the coziness of your lab or your home or wherever you might be. And if you're a person of faith, you can do the same thing. You can read your Bible, you can read your theology, you can go to church every Sunday, you can spend your time in Bible studies and things like that. And you can believe that you know what you need to know, and that is all that's really necessary. See, what I realized was that there was this stream in Christianity beginning sometime in the probably the 17th century or so, when we began to um, think like the Enlightenment philosophers did. That I think, therefore I am. I believe, therefore I am. I know, therefore I am. And we applied that to how religion and Christianity functioned. And what I discovered, and why did I discover this? Why is the question that has still stuck with me all these years. Why is it that I saw at the age of 17 something totally different? Why did I see that there was a reality that was beyond my apprehension at that moment, and that it had such little definition and yet such clearly distinctive reality that I had to spend, and I have spent the rest of my life pursuing what does it mean to believe and to act on that belief. And by acting on that belief, I mean, it really is simply a form of spirituality where we say, I'm going to trust this God that I do not know wholly and fully, but I'm going to trust that God will be there in the moment of my need. And there have been many, many consequential moments in my life where I have placed myself in jeopardy because I believed it was the right thing to do in that moment. And my prayer was, I'm going to do this with total trust that if this is the wrong move, you will save me. Now, I know that opens up all kinds of questions about theodicy and things like that. Why do people who have cancer pray that God would take the cancer when they doesn't? Well, why am I in that situation where I've had things that I prayed about that didn't have the answer that I was looking for, but somehow I came out of it in a different place, in a different way, and in a much better place than I was before? How do I explain that? I really don't, other than to say, okay, I have enough proof for myself. I don't have enough proof for anyone else. And I am willing to take a step forward and trust that, in this case, the divine God of creation, who is exhibited in the flesh in the person of Jesus Christ, born on this day two millennia ago. I have enough to go on that it grants me a sense of security, not certainty, but security. And I look at my life and I look at this certainty that only comes through faith as something that will carry me through into my hundreds, in the next century. And I want to live into the next century because I want to have more of this experience of faith being consequential, and that I'm going to put myself in positions where if I don't act, then something less desirable will take place. Now, I am definitely not setting myself up as some kind of paragon of faith or Christianity or belief or anything like that. This has nothing to do with that because I have no ego in this. I've vanquished my ego in favor of trusting that God will take whatever sense of purpose I have and magnify it in such a way that it has an effect upon people worldwide, and it has effect upon people generations from now, that I can look back from the transcendent world of heaven and say, that's that paid off. That's motivation for me. And so I'm suggesting that whatever you have placed your faith in, whether it's your own personality, whether it's science, whether it's your own conception of who God is, whether it's your family, your money, your position in the world, whatever you have placed your faith in, I just suggest that you spend more time questioning whether your faith is real and asking to see the consequences of your faith. Now, I'm saying this to you as a person, as one individual speaking to another, but I would like to take this to a collective sense and do the same thing at the organizational level. Because if you are the leader of an organization and you begin to ask the question about, are we really clear about what our mission is, whatever it is? Maybe we're a baseball team, or maybe we run a dry cleaners, or maybe we're a software company. Are we really clear what our mission is? And if we think that the mission is simply to make money or to become the dominant provider of these services, then I would say you have diminished your purpose in order to be certain that you will win in the long run. And I think when you are trying to be certain about winning, you will always lose the opportunity to have an impact that is far beyond what you imagine your potential to be. So I see that in this time, this period of change in the culture of leadership, that it's time for leaders to get out of their heads, stop fearing the loss of their jobs, stop fearing the loss of their money, stop fearing the loss of their privilege and their position, and say, what is it actually possible for us as a group of people to do to achieve something which 3 generations from now, 4 or 5 generations from now, they will be talking about this company that changed who they are so that they could have an impact upon the world that no one had ever seen before. See, I think that's what actually living a life of faith is about. It is getting out of your own way and allowing, from my perspective, allowing God to come in and say, let's go this place. Let's try this. And let's learn through the consequences of our failures and our successes to expand what we can do. I know this is what entrepreneurs have been talking about for generations, but once they get their business established, they stop asking those questions. They become just like every other business, and they stop growing. They stop pushing the edge of the envelope. There are a few of you, and those few of you that do not do that, you're known because you have not catered to the temptation to diminish your own expectations for your impact as a company. So here we are on Christmas Day, where we celebrate. I'm gonna put it this way: we're celebrating God's great risk that He can send a His Son, in this case, a member of the Holy Trinity, send His Son to earth in the form of a child, and out of that create something which has transformed the world over the last 2,000 years. I do want you to ponder this, because here we have this guy who, he had a very remarkable start. Then he basically disappeared for 25 years. Then he shows up, he's baptized with John the Baptist, and things began to happen. And never at any point in time is he trying to start a church. He's not trying to start some institution. He's trying to help people like you and me look beyond our own limitations and say, what is it I can do if I actually trust that the reality of consequence is in my favor? And the greatest trust there is to trust that God is real. And out of that, he had 12 12 disciples. One of them failed him. Then he added another. And then from those 12 men, in the space of a couple of generations, created the first world universal religion. And none of those people were directly responsible for the whole. A bunch of collective people all doing their own individual thing as they felt led. So I'm telling you that the world we live in is one of consequence, and the evidence never tells us enough that we need to know. So if you live according to consequence, meaning trial and error, learn from my mistakes, celebrate the successes, go in the direction which the successes are telling us, all those sorts of things. Those are the rules of consequence. When you go in the direction of consequence, you'll begin to learn what is real, and you'll see that what I see is that there's a transcendent reality that's far beyond what we can imagine, what we are aware of, or what we're conscious of. But we will become more so of it as we give ourselves to that process. So I wish you all peace and joy and fellowship with your families and your friends over these next few days. I hope that you will find within yourself a desire to be different than you have been, not worse, but better, and to discover something in yourself which says, I want to test, I want to trust, I want to put myself in a position where I'm going to learn something about myself that I've been unable to find out throughout the course of my whole life. And that is my story. And I guess I will say more about that as time goes on. So this is the fourth episode of this series of videos, The Changing Culture of Leadership. I've decided to run this to about 10 videos, and this will go out through the end of January. And so I hope you will watch. There'll be a Substack post tomorrow that takes some part of this and it expands upon it. And I hope that you have a fine day today and throughout this weekend. And we'll see you next week here on the Eddy Network podcast. Thank you.